Today we have George Karseras, who is talking about creativity. Let me just say a word or two about George while he's doing that. He's a chartered occupational and chartered sports psychologist, and he's the founder of the Team Up company, which is a UK-based management consultancy firm, very much specialising in teams and psychology, working in the corporate world as well as the sports world. Particularly likes working to deliver extreme teams. So very much a specialist in the field. George, are you ready to go?
I certainly am. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Simon, and welcome everybody. I'm excited to be doing this talk. Creativity isn't my main topic, but creative teams is part of really what successful team working is all about. And if I was to say one area that teams struggle with out of all of them, then I would say that being creative, being innovative is probably the one area that teams score the lowest on in the diagnostics that we regularly run. So how to be creative is a really interesting topic. So I'm very pleased to be part of this, and it's great that I'm part of a learning agenda. I do like, and well done to you all for tuning in. Learning is really what this is all about, and the more that we learn these days, the better we are. So let me start first of all by sort of positioning creativity into context. Why is creativity so important? Well, I mean, for obvious reasons, I guess. Interesting that we've got a computer audience. Many of these will talk to your industry. So obviously we've got COVID. So we're seeing how COVID has caused people to reinvent themselves, remarket, recreate new solutions because their small businesses or large businesses are suffering. We've got digitalization, which we're all aware of, the rapid pace of change and innovation that is driving, in terms of technology, the opportunities to be creative and to do that quickly. Regulation, not often something which you would associate with creativity, but there is some substantial evidence to show that companies that are able to be innovative on the back of regulation that's enforced upon them can steal an advantage over the competition. And of course, we've got market maturity. Some markets and organizations need to find ways to be innovative and creative in order to stay relevant. And also, why is creativity such a lovely subject? It's fun. And I think there's a real interesting sort of benefit in our working experiences, the mental health, especially these days, that having fun in our workplace and engaging in creative thinking is got to be a good thing. So I just thought I'd put this up. We get this question quite a lot with leadership. Are leaders born or made? I thought I would just raise the question, are creatives born or made? Some of you might go, well, I'm not a very creative person. And some of you go, well, I'm actually quite a creative thinker. We can do some psychometric testing. And some of us may well have a more creative bent. But in many ways, it's irrelevant, the debate. What's really interesting is how do we make ourselves more creative? That's the topic of this subject. So we can park any debate and really focus on the fact that actually there is a lot we can do to be more creative. And really, there's two areas that we can look at. There's the environmental, the conditions for creativity, and then there's the tactical, the techniques that we can bring. And my strong conviction, having been a team development consultant for the best part of 25 years, is that by far the most creative teams are experts at building the environments of creativity, and that's far trumps tools and techniques and tactics. So they're no good if you have good techniques and tactics to be creative, but you live in a team or exist in a team that is environmentally damaging in some way or is full of fear. It's not going to be much good. So I'm a big proponent of building the environments first and then adding the tactics on second. So my talk reflects that. The ideal climate, if we could look at conditions for creativity, really the big thing is how do we destigmatize errors? Creativity is about taking risks, it is about pushing the boundaries, it is about fundamentally being prepared to make mistakes. So how we destigmatize errors is absolutely front and center. And so some of the things which are relevant here is the notion of there is no such thing as a bad idea, no such thing as stupid questions, and let's have fun. These are kind of the environmental conditions you want to be creating. And that brings me seamlessly to the notion of what is now regarded as one of the biggest topics in teaming, especially, and in the workplace, the subject of psychological safety. And if those of you haven't come across this term, then I would recommend you look at it and you study it and you learn about it. And if you want to work in an organization and be successful, then building environments of psychological safety around you is a very, very important asset to have. And more importantly, for the relevance of this talk, this topic, the science, which we'll go on to in a second, makes a direct correlation between creative thinking and conditions that are high in psychological safety. So here's your first kind of takeaway. If you want to be creative and you want to build a creative environment, you want to be part of a creative team, or you want to lead a creative team, then you have to be able to be skilled at building psychological safety, okay? Which is where people feel able and prepared to take interpersonal risks and where they can speak their mind. All the research points to psychological safety being a predictor of creativity in teams. So question is, how do we build psychological safety? Well, as this person here is illustrating, it's full of risks and full of bear traps or sharks, as this image shows. But here is the first of three themes for you. Number one is about being vulnerable. How do we produce psychological safety? We become and we make ourselves a little bit more vulnerable to the people around us, and there are ways to do that, and they're all here. Each of these is a risk. If I ask for help, in fact, today I'm up in Liverpool with an organisation, and I ran a team exercise. And the exercise was, funnily enough, about name a mistake that you've made in the past that has cost you, but you learned a lesson, and where you didn't ask for help. And everyone had a story to tell about why they didn't ask for help. And of course, the reason is they didn't feel secure. They wanted to be the star. They didn't want to give away any weaknesses. They didn't want to be vulnerable. So a bit of advice in vulnerability is be prepared to ask for help. Admit weaknesses and mistakes. 25 years ago, it was in 2001. No, that's 20 years ago. My very first assignment with KPMG, I was on a piece of work with a company called NTL. And I just come from a very compassionate, humanistic psychology consultancy called Sporting Body Mind, run by two very humanistic, very lovely gentlemen who gave me lots of support and provided a lot of psychological safety for me. So when I entered KPMG and we had our first meeting, and the lady who was running the program said to us en masse in our very first program meeting, we didn't get this comms out. Who did this? Who was responsible for this? It was a kind of like all eyes were on me in a way, because it was in my area. And I just said it was me, and I made a mistake, and I'm sorry. And there was stunned silence, because this person was a notorious Rottweiler, and that was like the last thing you do is you admit your mistake. But I felt very comfortable doing it because I came from a very, very supportive background. And there was silence for about 5 seconds when everyone thought, that's it, he's off the project or something. And she just looked at me and went, okay, well, thanks very much for that, George, and for being honest. And there was a general shock in the system that she could be positive towards a mistake. And I learned a big lesson then. I think others did too. If you can deal with tough people, the last thing you want to do is be defensive and not own up. So creative environments through vulnerability, admit when you don't know something, admit when you made a mistake, put your hand up. It's the best thing you can possibly do. The others kind of speak for themselves. I think humor is important. Humor, we take a little bit of a risk in humor. And poking fun of yourself in self-depreciation is a very interesting and powerful way of becoming more vulnerable. And if you're a leader of a team, we don't want heroes. We want people who are more imperfect these days. So don't be averse to making fun of yourself, and being less heroic is a good way to build vulnerability and therefore psychological safety, and therefore encourage creativity. The second one is empathy. How do you build psychological safety? Listening, using good listening skills, building. If you restate, there's a very famous psychological therapy called Rogerian counseling, and all the Rogerian therapists, all they do is they restate what the person is saying in the session. So they will say, oh, so I hear you're not, that's very difficult for you. That must be very challenging. Tell me more. And so all they do is they restate and empathize, and it's a very powerful form of therapy. It sounds a bit passive, but when we restate, we are offering a bridge. And when we hear our ideas and suggestions restated back, often that can trigger thoughts and ideas. It's a very good creative medium to restate what you're hearing. And good dialogic skills. What do I mean by that? Language, we call it clean language. I'm not talking about swear words. We'll do an exercise in a second to help you with this, but this is about avoiding words like shoulds and you ought tos and got tos and especially buts and generally words that are not conducive to making people feel relaxed and less less judged. We don't want judgment. Judgment is a killer of creativity. So words that suggest open-mindedness, and that's what we call good dialogic skills. Okay, so on that front, we're going to do an exercise just to break up my tool. So I'm going to ask for a volunteer. We'll do an exercise on what the power of language. So I would like somebody in the audience to volunteer, take a risk, make yourself vulnerable, and volunteer to do a little exercise with me if we can. So I can't see Simon. Can you see who we've got here in terms of?
I think the first person to turn their video on and their microphone on gets to have the fan. Who wants to try to? All you need to do is be able to speak English. So we ask for this one. You turned your video on. Are you willing to join us? Ranga?
Yeah, Simon, I'm willing to.
Good.
Ranga, okay. So is it Ranga?
That's correct.
Ranga, okay, great. So Ranga, you and I are going to do a little bit of brainstorming here, or we're going to create a party, okay? And the party is amazing because we have got a budget between us of $100 million, okay? For the mother of all parties, okay?
Yeah.
So there's money, no expense. So you're going to make some suggestions, okay, of how we can spend our 100 million, okay, to have the best party ever, okay. And all I'm going to do and Simon, you're going to put the clock on if you can for about a minute or so. And all I'm going to say initially is yes, but, okay. And then we'll go from there and see what happens, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to come back to you with yes, but, and then you're going to respond to what I said. Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Over to you. So you're going to come up with some ideas of how we can spend 100 million.
Okay. For a party.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll go to a distance place like either Australia or America, and then we'll book it in a very expensive.
Yeah, but Australia, to be honest, is very hot, and there's spiders and snakes, so I'm not sure about that.
No, all over Australia is not the one. When we go for an expensive place and then very luxurious hotel, it's not an issue at all.
Yes, but I think if we just go luxury, we're not being very adventurous, really. Yeah.
If we are going to some nice places in America and big casinos, and then where we can lavishly spend all the money without even thinking where it is going.
Yes, but America, it's kind of the obvious place to go to, really. Las Vegas, and a bit obvious to me, Ranga.
I don't think you're getting anywhere, and you've had your minute's worth there, and we haven't got our party organised.
All right, Ranga. No, okay, Ranga. We're going to go again. Okay. All right. And all I'm going to do now is yes and. Okay. Off you go.
Try the same things.
Yeah, we should be going to either Australia and America.
Yes,
and
yes, and we can go to Ayers Rock. That's a lovely place to go and visit.
And we should be visiting the luxurious hotels, nice beaches, and then having a lavish party.
Yes, and okay, it's hot, but we can always put some suntan lotion and enjoy the beach.
And then we should be going to seeing the 3-4 places here and 3-4 places there, and then going on a separate charter flight so that we don't waste any time, and then we have our own luxurious travel from place to place.
Yes, and the more flights we have, the more variation we have, and the more experience we get.
Well, we've got a party. Hey, well done, guys.
So Ranga, this is a question for you, okay? So it's a bit unfair. Well done for putting your hand up, by the way. And I'm very sorry your credit card bill is going to be so high at the end of this session. But so what, how is it? What was it like when you heard the yes buts?
Yeah, it's pleasing. Initially, it's like you are accepting to my suggestions when you say yes.
So it wasn't so helpful.
Yeah, initially it was not so helpful. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is an old saying with the word but, which is when we put the word but in to a sentence, we can write off, the first part of the sentence. Really what we're saying is the second half after the but, right? So it's a small point. I know it's an artificial sort of experiment. And you can also see that, you can experience, Ranga, that the words we use they do make a big difference to the climate that we feel and the energy and the confidence that we have to keep on going, right? And to keep on making suggestions. So bear that in mind, okay, in terms of the language that that we use. Ranga, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And, I'll see you in Australia. And
thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to continue, if I can, to the third part, which is about learning. The question I asked is about how do we build psychological safety? How do we build a climate? And I said the answer really is in this wonderful thing called psychological safety. Then I said, okay, how do we build psychological safety? And there are 3 tenets to it. 1 is vulnerability. 2 is very good empathic dialogic skills. And the 3rd is having a learning attitude, a learning mindset, which is really about mistakes and how we view mistakes. And nothing worse to kill creative thinking than a judgmental critiquing of ideas too soon in the process, and nor a sense of curiosity, right? So how do we show learning and learning mindset? We're curious, we're open-minded. We don't put the yes buts. We go the yes ands, and we might ask a question, especially open questions. Question is quite an interesting one for creativity, because if I ask a question, do you think that's not really a question, that's a statement behind the question. So do you think that that's a good idea, or do you think, as my wife might say, do you think that's a nice meal I cooked, right? There's a statement behind the do you think. I hope it is a nice meal, or whatever else is being said. If we ask an open question, a how or a why or a what, then there's not usually a statement. We're just generally curious. So we want lots of curiosity, lots of questioning. Teams that are more creative ask more questions. Okay, that's just a data point. The other is failure. And seeing experimentation is what we're looking at really with creativity. And so we need to view failure not as a bad thing, but as a move in the right direction, a sign of a positive sign. There are some organizations out there, I think Honda's one of those, where they actually give prizes for failures, where they recognize in the endeavors of the process of trying to be creative. So even if the idea doesn't get off the ground, they're rewarding the idea or the acts of suggestion. And so they do lots of rewarding of wins as well, but certainly they see mistakes or failure not as a negative, but as a sign of something else: courage, bravery, and being prepared to take a risk. The other way to build a learning mindset reflexivity or reflection. In agile working, as you know, it's retroflexion, right? How we feedback. So these are very important ways to build a learning mindset and therefore build psychological safety. So a few additional tips in terms of environments as well as psychological safety is what we call greenhousing. We don't know whether something's going to turn into a beautiful tree or a lovely bunch of strawberries, or it could be a weed. We don't know. So putting things and allowing them to follow a path and not killing them too soon is a good idea. I often get people to move around in their seats to get a different perspective, getting a different view. Getting people to move into a slightly different space. The offsite is a good example, going to a different workspace, walking in a different direction to work, anything, having a different drink at lunchtime, anything that kind of freshens us up is a good thing. 2157 is an important number. If anyone might know what this number is, it's the number of attempts that Dyson had before he successfully launched his bagless Hoover. And he got his license for that. So keep going with creativity and don't give up. And then the other one is around design, right? Ergonomics and careful design of your workspace and the place that you're in. Laboratories for labs for agile working. Campuses, the pharmaceutical industry is very good with campuses, and as is Silicon Valley. And most of them got ping pong tables, right? Bit of fun, bit of creativity. I did some work about 15 years ago at the BBC up in Scotland, and they had a shed in the middle of one of their rooms. It was a red shed, and it was a kind of a place people could go to and to hothouse ideas. They didn't want to talk about it too much because it would have seen as a waste of public money, but I think it was quite a good creative idea in terms of their design. So just finally then, a few tactical tips. I hope this is, the environment is the key thing, but there are some other tactical tips which I'm going to share with you. All of these are available. If you go online, there's a lot of different ways to boost creativity, different ideas. I think for me, the answer is having these techniques up your sleeve, but more importantly is the environment that you create, as I said. But nevertheless, here are the tips that we have. And the first one is, the first three, I should say, they're related to being aware of the pitfalls of creative thinking. And we call these type 1 thinking, risk-averse thinking. I say we call these. This is Daniel Kehlmann from Thinking Fast and Slow fame. And the type 3 thinking really it's easy for the brain, it's lazy for the brain to fall into these pitfalls because it doesn't require us for us to have much energy. So we have selective thinking. So, confirmation bias is we think that we go for what we believe, we prove our own thoughts right. So in this situation, rather than create a diverse team with lots of possible creativity, I'll just hire people who think like me, who may even look like me, white, male and stale. And that's not really going to be a good way to be creative, all right? Because I'm selectively thinking. And then we have assumptive thinking, where I'm too lazy to question my assumptions about certain things. So an opposite example is the assumption that was held that the Earth is flat. Another assumptive thought was that we can't break the 4-minute mile in running. And when Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, I think it was broken something like 15 times in the next 6 months or so. Everyone then broke it, right? So, and then the third one's reactive thinking. So a little test there. If you read that little mathematical question, you can see maybe that there's an obvious answer and it's wrong. Okay, and most people go for the obvious answer because it's lazy. So we tend to have reactive thinking. So those are things to watch out for. And then more pro-prize type 2 thinking, which is much more to do with we invest our energy. We got various exercises that we can techniques we can use. So if I was a musician, I want to have a creative song, I might say, what would John Lennon do with this chord? Or what would David Bowie do here, for example? Brainstorming, we probably know about. There are no wrong answers in the brainstorm. The glass dome is quite interesting, where you pose a question to a group and then you keep quiet, you put an imaginary glass dome over your head, and then you're not vested in the answer, so you don't let other people who don't know necessarily so much about the domain talk about it, and you get creative thinking because you're not influencing that from your own perspective. And De Bono hats, a very famous creative genius, Edward De Bono, and he came up with this idea of hats where we put different hats on and we take different perspectives, and these are worth looking at. They haven't come up, the colors haven't come up there, but all different types of thinking. As you can say, oh, I'm going to put my yellow hat on, so I'm going to be very positive about this idea, and that might create something in the team around that. Or I might put a red hat on and talk about the feelings I get from that. Or I might put a white hat on and really be very neutral and talk about facts and figures. And so my contribution to the creative process comes from the hat that I put on, and it might stimulate thinking from other people. That's quite a nice way of doing it. Oh, and there are the colors. There was a build on this. There you go. That wasn't my build, by the way. And finally, we have games and props. So remember, Anna, these are ways to build creative ideas. You can do warm-ups with people and icebreakers to get people in the mood. You can use analogies and metaphors are very strong. Like if we're going to be a car, what kind of car would this product be? And then you can use creative mediums like art, Play-Doh, Lego, etc., music to stimulate the part of the brain that actually does come up with the creativity. And part of the fun is also helped with a number of different props like music, juggling balls in the hands, slinkies and sweets and chocolates. They're all ways to make things fun and a bit more engaging. These are all good techniques. So in summary, focus on the climate is the most important thing for me in how to be creative. There's a load of different techniques. You can arm yourself with a few of those. I've given you some of those today. There's more if you haven't got time for. And the big thing with creativity is make it fun. And if you're winning, if you're smiling with creativity, your chances are you're winning with creativity. And it tends to work that way. So there you have it. That's my talk, Simon. I probably went way over time, but at least I get a holiday to Australia with my friend here, so not so bad.
Yes, no, I think your timekeeping was good, but I did start you a little bit late. So, everybody, George does have to rush off, catch a train and travel a long way back home, so we shouldn't keep him too long. But George, did you want to take a question or two? Or
yes, please. No, I got 5 minutes for sure before I have to shoot. So yes, I can't see the questions because I'm on presentation mode. So shall I stop sharing and then, or you can feed me questions from the chat, Simon, if you want.
Yeah. Well, so far we've had a lot of fun observations. That most of them weren't questions. We have one now from Antonio. Can you see that on your screen there?
I'll just click on chat. Antonio. Oh, how diversity, inclusion, and belonging impact to have a safe. Okay, so really good question, Antonio. So for sure, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, massive element in psychological safety, and there's some strong science supporting. The more diverse the team, the more likely there's going to be creativity, provided the team leader of that team creates psychological safety, and you don't get in groups and out groups. So it can be a wonderful thing if it's handled well. It needs to be handled well because especially virtual teams, it's easy for people to bring prejudice without realizing it. So yes, the more diversity, the better.
Excellent.
Any other questions?
Yes, well, this one says, what is your no tip? I think it must probably meant top tip, or is it a no tip as in shouldn't do it?
I think the most important, okay, so top tip. Okay, let's just do top tip for creativity. I honestly think, okay, so this is taken from my field of, I suppose, experience and professional in sport. Okay, in sport. So sport's a really good medium. Teams that are tight, who don't play with adventure, with creativity. Let's take a football team, for example, who tend to pass the ball sideways and play very static and very predictable. They tend to be quite serious. Okay. There's a seriousness in their play, and that's often a result of the seriousness in the coaching team. So are you
going to name this team?
Well, let's name England. About 4 to 8 years ago under Capello, right? So very, very serious team. They were so nervous, and indeed the previous manager to to Roy Hodgson. If you watch them on the TV, that team, their manager's very serious looking. Capello wouldn't even allow them to eat ketchup. He was so serious, right? So seriousness and creativity don't go well together. If you look at the team that Southgate's put together and look at some of the football managers and any of the managers I've worked with over the years, the best, most creative, adventurous teams, they have a joie de vivre, a lightness about them. And if you listen to anybody in sport, they say, I'm going to go out and have fun. They train to have fun, to say that. Because when they're having fun, they're loose. And when they're loose, they can make decisions in the creative space and do things in play in the moment, we call it. So my number one top tip for creativity is make it fun and do it with a smile on your face. Okay, and that's my top tip.
There was an interesting little conversation on the chat while you were doing your exercise, George, which I should just share with you as a last thought, which is that if you had $100 million to spare, surely you would want to go up into space on a space rocket, would you not?
Would I want to go, or would you want to send me up on a space rocket? Which of those?
That was what you should do with that amount of money, was the suggestion that people are mooting on the chat.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what these people... Richard Branson, funnily enough, who has a mission, a purpose in life, I was reading it today. His purpose is to have fun, to make mistakes, and to learn from... To have fun in his journey and to learn from his mistakes. I thought it was a very interesting personal purpose statement, right? So he's all about creativity and innovation and fun and making mistakes. And he's done very well. So what's he doing with his money? He's going into space, right? That's part of his mission. Literally, his personal mission is to go on a mission.
Yeah. I keep my fortune locked away under my mattress. It's much safer that way. We should move on, though. Thank you very much, George. That was excellent.